Hey there, once you get into a project and start working on all sorts of details, your layers panel might get messy. In case you're stuck with a chaotic project, let me show you how you can identify key layers with some cool tricks. We're going to start with this PSD. Here we can see the main folders are decently labelled, but as you open them, some don't make much sense. Plus, it's a hefty project. Here's my first tip to quickly identify a layer or a group. Toggle its visibility. You do that by clicking several times on its eye symbol to its left. Alternate between Control 1 and Control 0. Remember, Control 1 sets the view mode at 100%, while Control 0 fits the entire project on your screen. In this case, we're pretty zoomed out, but let's try it. OK, footers, reviewers, galleries, things look pretty good. Let's go back to 100% and see some finer details. Inside the sub-hero group, we have three folders called 321. We can toggle their visibility to identify them, or tip number 2, you can move them on the canvas and observe what's going on. Here it seems 1 is the group on the left and it contains this entire element. Once you've spotted it, use Ctrl Z to put it back in its place. Here's a note about undo through Ctrl Z. Starting with Photoshop CC 2019, each time you hit Ctrl Z, you're going to go back a step. Hit it 2 times and you'll undo 2 actions. This is logical and easy to get, but if you have an older version, it doesn't matter if it's from 6 months ago or 6 years ago, you have to do this. Ctrl Z to undo 1 action, sure, but you need to use Alt Ctrl Z to go back several steps. Just a friendly reminder. If that's not for you, open the History panel from Window, History. I always have it docked here, and this shows me everything I've done so far. So if I want to go back 20 steps, it'll be easier to use this panel rather than pressing Ctrl Z 20 times. OK, back to our project. Let's open any of these folders and see what they contain. We have several text layers, an icon, but I'm not sure what this ellipse 2 is. If I toggle its visibility, I don't notice any particular change, and that brings me to technique number 3. When you can't spot a layer by toggling its visibility or moving it around, create a selection. Here's how this works. You hold Control and you click on its thumbnail once. You've just created a selection. We have an entire chapter dedicated to them, so don't worry about it. What's important is we get this interesting stroke around it, and now we can see this is a shape layer that has a very washed out colour. Let's see what else we can find in this project. Layer 22 from the top of our panel is a great candidate. I'll try all tips. 1. Toggle its visibility. I don't notice anything, but it's a very long project. Let me repeat the process while I'm looking at it with the help of Ctrl 0. Still nothing. Let me zoom back in and I'll try tip number 2, move it. OK, I can see from my smart guides, from these pink lines that show up, that it's somewhere in the middle of my canvas, but I'm not sure where it is. Tip 3, create a selection. I'll hold Control and I'll click on its thumbnail. OK, we have no error message. That means there's an active selection somewhere. Looking at the project up and down, I can't seem to find it. This is a difficult case. That's quite unlikely to happen in your first project, but you never know what you'll come across by opening various PSDs from the web. Here's tip number 4. When nothing else works, use the marquee tool with your alignment tools. Let me show you the technique even though we haven't covered selections yet. I'll get the marquee tool through its hotkey M. It's this second tool from the left panel. Now, anywhere in plain sight, I'll draw out a small box. I'll switch to my Move tool and my alignment options are active. Press on Align Vertical Centers and Align Horizontal Centers, and this tricky layer will show up in the middle of my box. And here it is. If we zoom in, we can see it's actually 2 tiny black dots. Let me undo a few times so we can see where it was. OK, it was placed over this dark image and that's why we couldn't see it. If I make a selection again and I zoom in, we can see this effect, but at 100% you may miss it. Tip number 5 is something I discourage using, but some people really enjoy it. While on the Move tool, you can enable this setting from the options bar, Show Transform Controls. Now if I select any layer whatsoever, it's going to look like I use Ctrl T on it to transform it. Actually, if you go over any of these handles, you can resize it with any additional commands. Some Photoshop users like this option because it clearly shows you what layer you're working on. Personally, I think the control-click technique solves half the problem, and for the other half, you simply glance at the Layers panel from time to time and you can see what layer is highlighted. Let me show you another case. Let's switch tabs, and here we can see this project is considerably smaller. It doesn't look that difficult, so why do we need so many ways to identify a layer anyway? Well, let's take it from the top of this panel. Let's toggle the visibility of layer 8. Did you notice the change? If you're a regular Hawkeye or a sniper, you'll have noticed this layer contains this leaf's details. So this visibility technique isn't great in this case. Let's try tip number 3, the selection method. As you can see, we get an error because these are very fine details, almost transparent, and Photoshop has a hard time finding them. The same thing happens when we try to make a selection based on layer 10. We get the same error. But if we try tip number 2, move it and then undo, we can see it's this shadow part here. So I hope now you understand why it pays to know several ways to identify a layer. You never know which one will better suit your circumstances, so that's why I strongly suggest you learn all of them. You have both PSDs attached, so please play around and go through all these steps by yourself. Have fun!